Humility is praised by the weak because it keeps the strong from claiming their due. It is dressed as a virtue, but in the theater of power, it is nothing more than a costume that strips the ruler of command. The man who lowers his head teaches others to step on it. The one who silences his ambition for the sake of appearing modest does not remove the envy of others, he multiplies it. In politics, in business, in war, humility is interpreted not as nobility, but as hesitation. Those who wait for recognition without demanding it are swallowed by those who know how to impose their presence. Every throne left unguarded is taken. Every silence in the council chamber becomes an invitation for another voice to dominate. Humility leaves space, and power abhors a vacuum. The humble man thinks he earns trust, but in reality, he earns invisibility. He believes that by not displaying his strength, others will feel less threatened. But those who seek advantage are never pacified by kindness. They are sharpened by it. They study the quiet one as prey. They calculate that beneath his lowered eyes lies either weakness to be exploited or cunning to be destroyed. In either case, he becomes a target. Do not mistake arrogance for presence. True power does not scream, but it does not bow either. It stands. It commands attention through clarity, not humility. The ruler must not think of himself as equal among all men. He must think of himself as the axis around which decisions turn. To pretend otherwise is to abdicate before the crown has even slipped from his head. Humility is dangerous because it denies ambition its rightful face. It is ambition that builds states, founds empires, and bends history. To hide it under a cloak of modesty is to suffocate the very fire that separates leaders from the lead. The lion that pretends to be a sheep may win applause from the flock, but the wolf will not be deceived. The worst thing you can do is to teach others that you do not matter, to downplay your victories, to soften your strength, to deny the sharpness of your mind. This is not virtue, it is self-betrayal. And betrayal, even of the self, is punished in the same way as treason to the state, with removal, with erasure, with irrelevance. Do not be humble, be precise, be controlled, be present. Let them see your shadow before they hear your voice, and let your words remind them why it is you who leads, and they who follow. The man who embraces humility as a creed begins to shrink himself before others even ask it of him. He folds his shoulders inward. He hides his victories beneath layers of modesty, and he believes that this disguise will shield him from envy. Yet envy does not vanish when you conceal your power. It festers and grows. Those who envy will always sense strength, no matter how carefully you mask it, and they will conspire all the more ruthlessly because they believe you are too timid to strike back. Humility feeds their hunger. It gives them time, and in the world of power, time is the weapon of those who cannot face you head-on. Humility is a currency that cannot be spent in the marketplace of command. When you attempt to purchase loyalty with modesty, you receive only suspicion in return. People trust what they can measure, what they can fear, what they can rely upon. A ruler who refuses to display his strength is like a fortress that leaves its walls unguarded. Outsiders will test the gates. Insiders will plot betrayal. In every circle of influence, perception is reality. If you are humble to the point of invisibility, you cease to exist in the minds of those who matter, and the void you leave behind will be filled by louder, bolder, hungrier men. Consider the theater of politics. The humble figure waits patiently to be called upon, but the stage is not built for patience. The curtain rises, and the crowd turns to the one who steps forward, not the one who bows in the shadows. History remembers those who seize their role, who imprint their presence on every scene, who refuse to disappear behind the false safety of modesty. To be humble is to hand over the script to another actor, and once he speaks the lines, your silence will not be forgiven, it will be forgotten. Power demands performance, not the performance of arrogance, not the careless display of vanity, but the performance of certainty. You must let your gestures declare what your words will later confirm, that you are unshaken, unmovable, indispensable. Humility does not produce certainty, it produces doubt. Doubt in yourself, doubt in your followers, doubt in your enemies who watch you, and conclude that you lack the conviction to rule. The humble man becomes a negotiator of his own importance, always offering discounts on his value until nothing remains. The world is not kind to those who minimize themselves. The world rewards presence, clarity, decisiveness. It honors those who stand in the center of storms and refuse to bend their head to the wind. To be humble is to break before the storm even begins. The humble man believes that lowering his gaze disarms the lightning, but lightning does not choose its target out of pity. It strikes where it will, and often it strikes the one who crouches lowest, thinking himself safe. You cannot demand loyalty if you refuse to embody command. You cannot inspire respect if you teach others that you are smaller than you truly are. The man who downplays his own worth invites others to measure him as less than they are, and once they have measured him, they will treat him accordingly. Respect is never born from humility. It is born from recognition of necessity, and necessity is declared, not whispered. To carry yourself with presence is not to boast. It is to remind the world that you exist with force, that you are not to be dismissed, that you carry within you the fire to shape outcome. Humility extinguishes that fire in public, leaving only a faint smoke. And smoke cannot move armies, cannot inspire allies, cannot terrify rivals. Only flame can do that. Only certainty, displayed without apology, has the power to ignite allegiance or to command obedience. So let the world call humility a virtue. Let the weak dress themselves in it as if it were armor. You, who seek to command, must see it for what it is, a quiet execution of your own influence. The worst thing you can do is to dim your light in the hope that others will not be blinded by it. They will still despise you for the light you hold, and now they will also despise you for lacking the courage to use it. Better to burn, better to blaze, better to be feared for the fire than pitied for the smoke. The one who clings to humility as a principle imagines he buys peace, but in truth, he purchases exposure. For peace does not belong to those who lower their guard. It belongs to those whose presence makes attack too costly. The ruler who bends his posture in modesty is already halfway conquered, for he signals to both ally and enemy that his dignity is negotiable, and what is negotiable in a leader becomes expendable in the eyes of those who serve him. Humility is not innocence. It is surrender disguised as virtue. It invites others to probe, to test, to see how far you will retreat before you break. And they will probe, for men are not content with balance. They are driven by appetite. When you diminish yourself, they do not see nobility, they see opportunity. And opportunity is the soil in which betrayal grows. To be humble in the arena of power is to plant the seeds of your own undoing in the fertile ground of human ambition. Every court, every company, every council is a battlefield of appearances. It is not enough to be competent. You must be seen as necessary. It is not enough to be intelligent. You must be seen as decisive. And if you mask yourself with humility, you deny others the proof of your necessity. They begin to ask themselves, if he does not believe in his own weight, why should we? The humble man withdraws from his own shadow until it no longer touches those around him. And in that absence, another shadow rises. Understand this. Men are moved by force, not by silence. They are persuaded by presence, not by withdrawal. Even the gentle word carries weight only when it falls from the mouth of one whose strength is acknowledged. Without that recognition, even wisdom sounds like a whisper lost in the noise of louder voices. The humble man becomes a ghost in the council of the living, his thoughts drowned, his influence erased. Those who achieve dominion do not apologize for it. They may restrain themselves. They may disguise their ambition for a time, but never do they destroy it with false modesty. They know that the mask of humility, worn too long, ceases to be a disguise and becomes a prison. And once you are trapped within it, the key is no longer yours. It is held by those who benefit from your silence. So what is the alternative? To stand without bowing, to command without pleading, to accept that in the realm of power, humility is not a virtue but a fracture. Strength does not mean arrogance, but it does mean refusal to shrink. Influence does not mean noise, but it does mean presence. And presence cannot coexist with humility that erases the self. The worst thing you can do is to wait for the world to recognize you while you conceal yourself in modesty. Recognition is not given, it is taken. Authority is not bestowed upon the humble, it is surrendered to the one who seizes it. Those who hide their greatness beneath humility are not remembered as noble, they are remembered as forgotten. And history does not preserve the forgotten. Tell me, do you wish to be pitied for your humility or feared for your command? Do you wish to be applauded as modest or remembered as indispensable? The choice lies not in the hands of others, but in the posture you assume before them. Bend, and you teach them to conquer you. Stand, and you teach them to obey. The illusion of humility deceives only the one who wears it. He convinces himself that by lowering his stature he earns security, that by concealing his strength he avoids conflict. But conflict does not vanish. When ignored, it sharpens its blade in the shadows. By presenting himself as unthreatening, the humble man becomes the most convenient sacrifice, the one chosen when blood must be spilled to appease rivals or to stabilize factions. His humility becomes his death sentence, signed not by his enemies alone, but by his own refusal to appear necessary. In the mechanics of power, necessity is the sole guarantor of survival. You must be seen as vital, as irreplaceable, as the pillar upon which the structure rests. Humility erodes this perception, for the humble man insists he is but one among many, and if he insists long enough, others will believe him. They will discover that the pillar can be removed without collapse, and once that thought takes root, they will act upon it. Power is not about truth, it is about conviction. If you do not project it, no one will defend it on your behalf. Consider how loyalty is won, not by humility, but by projection of strength. Men follow not the one who hides, but the one who declares, the one whose presence silences hesitation. Loyalty is secured when others see no alternative, when they understand that their own survival and ambition are bound to yours. Humility dissolves this bond, for it convinces them you are not their axis, merely their companion, and companions can be abandoned, replaced, forgotten. Leaders cannot. The humble man tells himself he will be respected for his restraint, but restraint without power is not respect, it is irrelevance. The masses may applaud his modesty, but their applause is hollow, for it costs them nothing. They will cheer his humility today and betray him tomorrow, for nothing binds them to one who binds himself in silence. Applause is not loyalty, and humility does not command allegiance. Only necessity commands. Only presence endures. Those who rise in this world understand that masks must be chosen carefully. At times, you may cloak yourself in patience, in discretion, even in silence, but never in humility. For humility is not a cloak, it is a burial shroud. Once worn too long, it buries your ambition beneath layers of denial until even you forget the force you once carried. And when you forget, the world forgets. Do not let them teach you that humility is safety. It is not safety, it is surrender. It is the quiet abdication of your right to rule, disguised as virtue, so that you feel noble while they strip you of influence. The world is ruled not by those who lower their heads, but by those who dare to keep their gaze steady while others flinch. To rule is to accept the weight of visibility, to embrace the danger of presence, to stand exposed and unyielding before envy, hatred, and fear. The worst thing you can do is to retreat into the shadows under the banner of humility. The shadows do not protect, they consume. And when the stage is lit and the curtain rises, it is not the humble who step forward, it is the bold. History does not applaud the bowed head. It crowns the one who dared to stand upright, even when the blade hung above him. Humility is praised most loudly by those who benefit from your restraint. They urge you to remain modest, to stay small, to avoid ambition because your ambition threatens their own. They call humility a virtue not because it strengthens you, but because it weakens you in their favor. When the powerful speak of the value of humility, they speak as hunters do of tame prey. It is advice meant not for equals, but for subordinates. The danger of humility is that it becomes a habit. At first, it is an act, a careful bow to disarm suspicion. But acts, repeated, harden into identity. Soon, the man who lowers his head no longer remembers how to lift it. He convinces himself he does not deserve the command he once sought. He teaches himself to fear the very fire that could have carried him higher. This is how rulers dissolve into servants, not by defeat in open battle, but by surrendering their own ambition in the name of humility. Never forget that appearances are weapons. The world does not see your heart, it sees your posture. A bowed head speaks louder than any proclamation of strength. When you diminish yourself publicly, you hand your rivals a narrative that you are lesser, that you are uncertain, that you are replaceable. And once that story takes root, it becomes the truth others act upon. They will build their plans not around your presence, but around your absence. There is a moment every leader faces when he must decide whether to stand in the storm or to retreat behind humility. To retreat is to lose everything. For storms pass, but the memory of weakness remains. Men do not remember the storm, they remember who weathered it without bending. They measure their loyalty, their obedience, their fear by that memory. If you vanish into humility when the storm rises, you will never again command their faith. Even in silence, you must carry yourself as indispensable. Even in caution, you must appear unshakable. This is not arrogance, it is survival. For no one defends the humble man when enemies circle. They defend only the one who convinces them that their own fate collapses if he falls. Humility severs this bond. It tells them that your fall is of no consequence. And once they believe it, they will not hesitate to let you fall. The humble man thinks he has disarmed envy, but envy does not disappear. It shifts. It no longer fears him as a rival. It pities him as a victim. And pity has no place in the arena of power. Pity is permission to erase. Pity is the prelude to irrelevance. Better to be hated than pitied, for hatred still acknowledges your strength. Pity denies it altogether. Understand this truth. You are not remembered for hiding your greatness, but for wielding it. Humility erases memory. Presence carves it into stone. Those who bend are forgotten. Those who stand, even at the cost of being feared, are eternal. And in the architecture of power, eternity is the only prize worth seeking. The humble man deceives himself into thinking he has avoided danger by stepping aside. Yet in power, to step aside is to invite replacement. The throne does not remain empty. The council seat does not stay vacant. Nature itself abhors the void, and politics follows the same law. If you remove yourself in humility, another fills the space with speed and certainty. And when he stands where you bowed, he will not remember your virtue, he will remember only your absence. Humility is often confused with prudence, but the two are not the same. Prudence is calculation, the art of advancing without exposing yourself to unnecessary risk. Humility, however, is self-erasure. It does not guard your power, it abandons it. Prudence disguises ambition until the moment is ripe. Humility suffocates ambition until it withers altogether. The prudent man still rises. The humble man disappears. The world is governed not by those who wait for recognition, but by those who seize it. Titles, offices, crowns, these are not gifts bestowed upon the modest. They are prizes torn from the uncertainty of rivals. History is filled with men who claimed greatness because they declared it first, and others who lost it because they waited too long. Humility waits, and waiting is the most dangerous act in the theater of power, for it gives your adversaries the time they need to organize your downfall. To bow in modesty is to feed the illusion that others will protect you out of gratitude. But gratitude is the most fragile currency in existence. It fades with the next favor, the next gesture, the next spectacle. Gratitude cannot be stored, cannot be relied upon, cannot be used as a shield. Those who rely on it soon discover it vanishes when loyalty is most needed. Humility trades strength for gratitude, and gratitude cannot defend a crown. Consider the face you present to the world. Every gesture, every word, every silence, every glance, these are instruments. Use them to project certainty, to cast weight, to remind others that your presence is a condition they cannot ignore. If you instead project humility, you teach them that your presence is negotiable, and what is negotiable in power becomes disposable. The moment you allow others to imagine the world without you, they will begin to build it. The humble man is applauded, yes, but applause is not allegiance. Crowds cheer what entertains them in the moment. They do not bleed for it. They do not defend it when the knives are drawn. Applause vanishes as quickly as it arrives, leaving only echoes, and echoes do not protect a throne. The ruler must demand not applause, but recognition. Recognition binds, applause distracts. Humility settles for applause and is abandoned when recognition is required. So let the world call you arrogant if it must. Better arrogance than invisibility. Better to be accused of pride than to be erased by modesty. For the proud man is still a figure in the arena, watched, judged, envied, feared. The humble man is a shadow that passes unmarked, whose fall is neither mourned nor remembered. And in the end, in power as in life, to be forgotten is the true death. Humility weakens the instinct of survival. It convinces a man that by lowering himself, he will soften the blows of fate, that by appearing small, he will escape the notice of predators. But predators do not ignore the weak. They hunt them first. They move past the strong only to return later, but the humble they devour at once. For humility does not shield its signals. It signals vulnerability, hesitation, and the absence of will. And in every hierarchy, those signals are read without mercy. The myth of humility is useful only to those who teach it. Priests preach it to keep their flocks obedient. Masters demand it to keep their servants pliant. Rivals praise it when they see it in you, because it assures them you will not resist their advance. But no ruler, no general, no sovereign who shaped the world ever lived by humility. They may have worn it briefly as a disguise, but when the moment came, they cast it aside and revealed the steel beneath. The humble man believes the disguise itself is strength, and that is why he perishes. In power, every interaction is a negotiation of position. To enter those negotiations with humility is to accept defeat before the first word is spoken. The humble man apologizes for his demands, dilutes his presence, and convinces himself he is being noble. The other side hears only concession, and concession becomes expectation. From that point on, every step backward is interpreted not as virtue but as weakness, and weakness once revealed is never forgotten. Even the natural world rejects humility as a path to survival. The tree that bends too low in every wind eventually snaps, its roots exposed and torn. The animal that shrinks before predators does not escape it is taken. The sun does not dim its light to spare the eyes of those who cannot bear it. It shines, unyielding, and all life bends itself around its force. Power follows the same law. You endure not by hiding your strength, but by displaying it so clearly that others shape themselves around you. The humble man mistakes quietness for wisdom, but wisdom without force is a voice lost in the crowd. A ruler must not only think clearly, he must appear unshakable, for men trust appearances even when they doubt words. They will not follow the one who lowers himself in humility, for following demands belief in superiority. And who can believe in the superiority of one who insists he is beneath them? If you would command, abandon humility. Choose instead the discipline of presence. Speak with weight, move with certainty. Let your silence feel heavier than the noise of others. Do not offer the world an image of smallness. It will believe you, and once it believes you, it will treat you as less than you are. The worst fate for one who seeks power is not to be hated, not even to be feared, but to be diminished until his existence makes no difference. Remember this: humility kills not with violence, but with erosion. It wears down your influence piece by piece until nothing remains. It convinces you to yield, to wait, to silence yourself, to step aside. And when at last you are forgotten, you will tell yourself it was dignity. But the truth is simpler. It was surrender, and surrender is the death mask of ambition. Look at the boardroom, where decisions shape empires of commerce. The one who enters with humility, waiting for acknowledgement, will leave unheard. His ideas may be sharper, his vision clearer, but the quiet tone, the lowered gaze, the refusal to claim authority, these bury his influence. The louder voice, even if it carries less truth, dominates the table, and soon the humble man watches his own thoughts return to him in another's mouth, dressed in confidence, rewarded with power. Consider the general at war. He who cloaks himself in humility before his troops loses their faith. Soldiers do not fight for one who appears uncertain of his own command. They march behind the man whose presence fills the battlefield. who acts not as one among them but as their anchor. A general who bows too low to win affection creates confusion, for in war, affection does not inspire obedience, clarity does. Humility makes him loved, perhaps, but never feared, and without fear, his orders dissolve in the smoke of battle. Think of the statesman negotiating with rivals. If he speaks with excessive modesty, softening his demands so as not to appear arrogant, he cedes the ground before the bargaining begins. His opponents, sensing timidity, will press harder, knowing he has already shown weakness. What he intended as diplomacy becomes capitulation, and once a rival has tasted your submission, he will demand more, not less. Humility is never enough to satisfy ambition, it only sharpens its appetite. Or imagine the artist whose work holds brilliance, but who insists on humbling himself before critics, apologizing for his talent, softening his message so as not to offend. His work is not remembered. Another, with lesser genius but greater audacity, fills the void. Audacity is mistaken for greatness. Humility is mistaken for mediocrity. History does not catalog every master. It records only those who force themselves to be seen. Even within families, humility corrodes authority. The father who bends too far to please, who hides his strength in modesty to be loved, finds himself ignored. Respect dissolves, and his word carries no weight. Children learn not to admire humility, but to exploit it. They do not obey the one who lowers himself. They obey the one who defines boundaries and enforces them. Affection without authority becomes pity, and pity cannot sustain order. Across all domains, the lesson repeats. Humility erases necessity. Whether in boardrooms, on battlefields, at negotiating tables, in art, or at home, the one who lowers himself teaches others to step over him. Applause may follow for a moment, but applause is not legacy. Presence is legacy. Command is legacy. Humility writes no legacies, it buries them. And yet, men cling to humility because it comforts them. It spares them from envy, spares them from accusation, spares them from the burden of standing exposed. But what is spared in the moment becomes lost forever. For no throne, no empire, no dynasty, no name carved into stone was ever built upon the virtue of being small. They were built by those who dared to stand tall, regardless of how many hands reached out to pull them down. Why being humble is the worst thing you can do lies in the simple fact that it denies the very essence of power, visibility. To rule, to command, to endure, you must be seen. The humble man hides himself, makes himself small, insists that others overlook him. But in power, invisibility is not safety, it is death. The moment you allow yourself to vanish from sight, you remove yourself from the calculations of others. And once you are absent from their calculations, you are absent from their future. Humility corrodes the foundations of authority by softening the edges of presence. It strips the weight from your words, the force from your gestures, the inevitability from your decisions. Without inevitability, there is no loyalty. Without weight, there is no obedience. The humble man thinks he preserves peace, but what he preserves is only uncertainty. And uncertainty in the realm of power is fatal, for it convinces others they can act without fear of consequence. Power is not merely possession, it is performance. To carry authority is to embody it, to let it radiate from your stance, your silence, your very being. Humility denies this performance. It whispers that to be less is to be more. But power does not hear whispers. It responds only to presence. The one who lowers himself cannot expect others to rise around him. They will not rise, they will replace. The worst thing you can do is to internalize humility until it reshapes how you see yourself. For once you believe you are small, you cease to reach beyond the limits placed upon you. You begin to accept your diminished role as natural, as righteous, as inevitable. And in that acceptance, ambition dies. A man may survive without ambition, but he will never rule. A state may function without ambition, but it will never expand. Humility suffocates the will that builds, the fire that creates, the hunger that compels history to move forward. In truth, humility is not a shield but a chain. It binds you to the expectations of others, shackles your spirit, and convinces you that restraint is virtue. but restraint without strategy is paralysis. And paralysis in power is indistinguishable from defeat. The humble man is conquered not by force, but by stillness. He is undone not by open attack, but by the gradual erosion of his will to command. To embrace humility is to choose erasure. To reject it is to choose presence. And presence, undeniable, unyielding, unapologetic, is the only soil from which power can grow. Being humble is the worst thing you can do, because it strips you of the weapon every ruler must wield: perception. Power does not live in private virtues or secret abilities. It lives in what others believe you are capable of. Humility sabotages this belief. It tells the world that you are less, that you deserve less, that you demand nothing, and the moment others accept this, they will give you exactly what you have declared nothing. To humble yourself is to surrender the battlefield of appearances. It is to retreat from the stage where influence is forged, leaving your rivals to script the story in your absence. They will not call you noble, they will call you weak. They will not protect you for lowering your head. They will sharpen their blades above it. For in politics, in war, in every contest of human ambition, perception is as lethal as steel, and humility is the dulling of your own edge. What humility truly does is distort hierarchy. Every human order, whether a family, a company, a state, depends on the recognition of who leads and who follows. The leader must not appear uncertain of his rank. He must not disguise his authority beneath a cloak of modesty, for that cloak is torn away the moment conflict rises. To act humbly is to confuse the chain of command, and confusion invites revolt. The worst thing you can do is not merely to diminish yourself in the eyes of others, but to teach them that it is acceptable to diminish you. Once they learn this lesson, it cannot be unlearned. They will treat you as replaceable, as expendable, as irrelevant. And no amount of wisdom, no reserve of skill, no hidden ambition can restore what humility has already conceded. Humility is the enemy of permanence. It ensures that your presence is temporary, that your influence fades as soon as the next voice speaks louder. Power demands continuity. It must echo. It must linger. It must leave marks that cannot be erased. Humility leaves no marks. It passes like a shadow across the wall, noticed for a moment, then gone. To reject humility is not to embrace vanity, it is to embrace survival. It is to understand that in the architecture of power, only the visible, the decisive, the undeniable endure. To lower yourself willingly is to walk out of history with your own hands, leaving no trace but silence. And silence has never ruled the world. Being humble is the worst thing you can do because it surrenders control of narrative. In the realm of power, narrative is destiny. The stories told about you by allies, by enemies, by the masses shape the boundaries of your influence. If you refuse to shape that story yourself, others will do it for you. Humility leaves the stage empty, and once others occupy it, they will not step aside. They will define you as small, as secondary, as disposable, and that definition will harden into truth. Humility is the worst thing you can do because it severs the link between power and fear. Every command rests on the calculation that disobedience carries consequence. But when you present yourself as humble, you erode that calculation. You suggest leniency where there should be consequence, equality where there must be hierarchy, softness where steel is required. And once fear dissolves, obedience follows it into dust. Authority without fear is a shadow, and shadows cannot command. To humble yourself is to cut the thread that binds ambition to destiny. Ambition, unrestrained and visible, bends circumstances to your will. It draws resources, allies, and opportunity to your orbit. Humility reverses this magnetism. It signals that you are content with less, and the world responds accordingly. The ambitious attract abundance, the humble attract neglect. To project humility is to broadcast that you will accept whatever remains once others have claimed their share. Being humble is the worst thing you can do because it trains you to live as if survival is enough. But rulers, leaders, commanders cannot survive on survival alone. They must expand. They must shape. They must dominate the field around them. Humility drains this instinct, replacing fire with hesitation, replacing boldness with compromise, replacing movement with stillness, and in stillness, others advance. At its core, humility is treason against the self. It convinces you to betray your own potential in exchange for temporary comfort. It whispers that obscurity is safety, that silence is dignity, that erasure is virtue. But the truth is harsher. Obscurity is death, silence is impotence, erasure is exile from history. To embrace humility is to place your own name in the margins where no one bothers to read. The worst thing you can do is to bow before the world and expect it to lift you up. The world does not lift, it takes. The world does not reward modesty, it exploits it. Only those who stand tall, who refuse to shrink, who demand to be seen, secure a place in the architecture of power. Humility is not a foundation, it is quicksand. Step into it, and you will sink without struggle, remembered by no one, replaced by anyone. Being humble is the worst thing you can do, because it strips away the aura that makes power feel inevitable. Power is not just held, it is believed in. Men obey not only because of the force you command, but because they sense the futility of resisting you. Humility dissolves that aura. It tells them resistance is possible, that your rule is uncertain, that your will can be bent. The moment inevitability disappears, challengers multiply, and what was once unthinkable becomes ordinary rebellion. Humility is the worst thing you can do, because it diminishes the spectacle of authority. Every leader is, in part, an actor on the stage of history. Authority must be seen, performed, reinforced in gesture, voice, and bearing. To appear humble is to dim the lights, to step back from the stage, to forfeit the drama that keeps others in awe. And once awe evaporates, all that remains is calculation. Men will ask themselves what you offer compared to another, and when loyalty is measured like coin, it is quickly spent elsewhere. To humble yourself is to invite equality where there must be distance. Authority requires elevation, a visible difference between the one who commands and the one who obeys. Humility erases that distance, convinces others you are like them. But men do not follow equals into storms. They follow figures who seem larger than life, whose presence assures them of direction. Equality is tolerable in friendship, fatal in leadership. Humility is the worst thing you can do, because it teaches others to look past you. A leader must be the center of gravity, the fixed point around which all others orbit. When you shrink yourself, the orbit shifts. Others become focal, decisions scatter, cohesion fractures. The system no longer depends on you, and once it no longer depends, you are irrelevant. Power thrives on dependence. Humility destroys it. To embrace humility is to abdicate the future. It anchors you to the present moment, convincing you that survival today is enough. But power is always a contest of tomorrow, of positioning for storms not yet arrived. The humble man does not prepare for tomorrow, because tomorrow belongs to the ambitious. By the time he looks up, the ground has already shifted, and he stands outside the gates of decisions that shape destiny. The worst thing you can do is to believe humility spares you from envy or hatred. Envy does not vanish when you lower yourself, it sharpens, because others see you as an easier target. Hatred does not dissolve when you bow, it deepens, because contempt is added to it. Humility gives your enemies both reason and opportunity to move against you, while robbing you of the will to resist. It is surrender before the battle, dressed as virtue. And surrender, in any form, is remembered only as defeat. Being humble is the worst thing you can do because it dismantles the very architecture of command. Authority is built on hierarchy, and hierarchy survives only when reinforced at every turn. To humble yourself is to erode the foundation, to blur the lines between the ruler and the ruled. Once that line fades, respect no longer flows upward, and obedience no longer descends downward. What remains is confusion, and confusion is the beginning of collapse. Humility is the worst thing you can do because it empties your words of weight. Every command, every decree, every decision carries power not only in substance, but in tone. When spoken with humility, words lose their sharpness. They sound like requests rather than orders, like hopes rather than directives. And in politics, in war, in governance, requests are ignored, hopes are mocked, and directives that lack edge are buried beneath competing voices. To humble yourself is to declare that you are willing to be overlooked. But leadership is not a place for those who tolerate invisibility. It is a role that demands constant presence, the shaping of perception, the domination of space. Once you accept being overlooked, you train others to build their worlds without you. Soon, decisions are made in rooms where your name is not mentioned, and once forgotten, you cannot be restored. Humility is the worst thing you can do because it confuses virtue with survival. True survival in power does not belong to the meek, it belongs to the formidable. Virtue, if it exists, is a tool to wield, not a banner to hide beneath. Humility elevates virtue above necessity, and in doing so, it invites ruin. For those who lead cannot afford the luxury of appearing small. Their survival depends on appearing essential. Being humble is the worst thing you can do because it forfeits momentum. Power is not static, it is motion, the constant pushing forward of presence and ambition. Humility halts that movement, freezes it, convinces you to pause while others advance. And in the world of power, stillness is indistinguishable from defeat. Once momentum is lost, even brilliance cannot easily restore it. At its core, humility is sabotage. It is the betrayal of your own force, the dulling of your own blade, the quiet suffocation of your own flame. It is not sacrifice, for sacrifice trades something for gain. Humility trades everything for nothing. The humble man believes he has protected himself by bowing, but in truth, he has only cleared the path for those who will walk over him. To choose humility is to choose disappearance, and disappearance is the one fate no ruler can endure. Being humble is the worst thing you can do, because it dissolves the aura of inevitability that power depends upon. Authority must feel unshakable, like stone set into the earth, like a law of nature itself. When you humble yourself, you transform certainty into doubt. You reveal cracks where none should exist, and doubt spreads faster than loyalty. It seeps into every corner of the order you command, until obedience becomes a matter of choice, and choice is the death of command. Humility is the worst thing you can do, because it undermines fear. Fear is not cruelty, it is stability. It is the recognition that disobedience carries weight. The humble man weakens that recognition. He signals tolerance, leniency, compromise. These might sound like virtues, but in the calculus of power, they are invitations. They tell others that boundaries may be tested, that orders may be bent, that defiance carries little risk. And once fear vanishes, control does not erode slowly, it collapses. To humble yourself is to distort presence. Power must be unmistakable, felt even in silence, sensed even in absence. Presence is not a voice alone, it is an atmosphere. But humility thins that atmosphere. It teaches others to breathe easily in your company, when they should feel the weight of your existence pressing upon them. Without that weight, they forget you are the axis around which they turn. And once forgotten, you are no longer central, you are peripheral, dispensable. Humility is the worst thing you can do because it poisons ambition at its root. Ambition is fire. It grows only if fed. Humility convinces you to starve it, to smother it beneath the ashes of modesty. You begin to shrink your aims, to call survival success, to dress timidity as wisdom, and slowly the fire dies. No man who buries his own ambition beneath humility can hope to direct the ambitions of others. The humble man thinks he buys security, but what he buys is erosion. Every moment of humility wears away at his authority, until one day he looks around and finds he commands nothing. The edifice of power does not fall in one blow. It crumbles piece by piece, and humility is the acid that eats away its stone. Being humble is the worst thing you can do because it denies the one truth upon which all leadership rests. You are what others perceive you to be. If you project greatness, they will treat you as great. If you project necessity, they will treat you as necessary. But if you project humility, they will treat you as lesser. And in power, once you are treated as lesser, you are already defeated. Being humble is the worst thing you can do because it erases distinction. Leadership thrives on separation, the visible difference between the one who commands and the many who obey. That separation must be cultivated, guarded, reinforced at every turn. Humility dissolves it. It makes the ruler appear ordinary, and once he is seen as ordinary, he loses the very justification for rule. Authority cannot survive equality. It requires distance, a visible line drawn in presence, voice, and bearing. Humility blurs that line until no one remembers why you stood above them at all. Humility is the worst thing you can do because it fractures momentum. Power, once moving, must never stop. It is a current that sweeps others into its flow, forcing them to adjust their course around you. The moment you humble yourself, you slow the current. And when the current weakens, men no longer feel compelled to move with it. They begin to carve their own paths. Fragmentation follows, then rebellion, then irrelevance. Humility is not pause, it is surrender of motion. To humble yourself is to disarm your greatest weapon, perception of necessity. In power, necessity is everything. Men endure hardship, risk, even suffering if they believe you are indispensable to their survival. But humility erodes this illusion. It signals that you are not vital, not central, not irreplaceable. And once that thought takes root, your position becomes a matter of convenience. Convenience is always temporary. Being humble is the worst thing you can do because it reshapes loyalty into calculation. Loyalty, in its purest form, is born not from affection, but from the understanding that betrayal is impossible without self-destruction. The humble man weakens this bond. He makes it easy for others to imagine life without him, to consider alternatives, to plan exits. Loyalty becomes conditional, fragile, breakable at the first opportunity. Humility is the worst thing you can do because it weakens the architecture of fear and respect alike. Respect cannot survive without strength, and fear cannot survive without consequence. Humility diminishes both. It presents you as harmless, and harmlessness is not respected, it is tolerated. Tolerance does not endure the storms of ambition. It is swept away the moment stronger winds appear. To embrace humility is to deny the essence of rule, projection. Rule is not only action, it is appearance. It is the cultivation of inevitability, the shaping of belief, the control of atmosphere. Humility unravels this art. It leaves the throne exposed, the crown light, the command hollow. And once unmasked, weakness is never forgotten. Being humble is the worst thing you can do because it convinces you that retreat is safety, when in truth, retreat is only the prelude to erasure. You step back once, and the world takes the ground. You lower your head once, and the world raises its knives. You diminish yourself once, and the world ensures you never rise again. In power, humility is not patience. It is abdication disguised as virtue. Humility is praised in sermons, celebrated in poems, immortalized in myths as if it were the crown of virtue. But in the arena, where power is the only currency, humility is the mask of the defeated. It may win you applause, but applause is fleeting. It may grant you sympathy, but sympathy is useless. Neither applause nor sympathy has ever secured a throne, commanded an army, or held a state together. They vanish like smoke, while power belongs only to those who refuse to bow. To be humble is to invite erasure. You step back, and another steps forward. You lower your gaze, and another raises theirs. You soften your voice, and another shouts louder. Soon, the world no longer remembers you as a presence but as an absence. History does not record the quiet retreat of the humble, it records the thunder of those who dared to stand. Understand this. Power demands presence, not apology. It requires that you make yourself seen, heard, felt, not with vanity, not with boastfulness, but with certainty, with the weight of inevitability that silences doubt before it speaks. The ruler cannot afford to shrink, for every moment of humility is an invitation for others to imagine the world without him, and once they imagine it, they will build it. The worst thing you can do is mistake humility for safety. Safety does not come from lowering yourself. It comes from standing so firm that others dare not move against you. Safety is not found in retreat, but in command, not in silence, but in clarity, not in erasure, but in presence. The world remembers those who refuse to diminish themselves, those who burned too brightly to be ignored, who cast shadows long enough to outlive their own lives. They were not humble. They did not apologize for their strength, their ambition, their authority. They carried it as both shield and sword, and the world bent around them. So let others praise humility as virtue. You must see it for what it is: a surrender wrapped in silk, a chain disguised as cloth, a betrayal dressed as nobility. Cast it off, stand without apology, command without hesitation, rule without lowering yourself into the comfort of smallness. For in power, the humble are forgotten, and the forgotten are already dead.